You're stocking up, making plans, and feeling ready for anything. But what if you're not as prepared as you think? In a crisis, confidence can be dangerous if it's built on false assumptions. There are hidden gaps in most survival plans that could leave you vulnerable when disaster strikes. Maybe you've got plenty of food and water, but have you considered medical supplies? What about security, power outages, or the psychological toll of an extended emergency? Even the most seasoned preppers can overlook critical weak spots. In this video, we're breaking down 10 reasons you might not be as ready as you believe and how to fix those mistakes before it's too late. From supply miscalculations to overconfidence in your gear, we'll cover the most common prepper blind spots so you can strengthen your survival game today. Stick around because what you don't know could be the difference between struggle and survival. 1. Underestimating food and water needs. Let's be real. Most people have no idea how much food and water they actually need to survive long term. A few cases of bottled water and a couple of cans of beans? That's not even close. If you think you're prepared but haven't run the numbers, you're setting yourself up for failure. Here's the hard truth. You need at least 1 gallon of water per person per day. That's just for drinking and basic hygiene. Cooking, washing, add even more. Now multiply that by 7 for a week, 30 for a month, and 365 for a year. Suddenly that stash of bottled water looks laughable. Food is no different. 3 meals a day per person. How long can your current stockpile actually last? And no, rationing down to 1 meal a day isn't a solution. It's a slow ticket to malnutrition. Do you have enough calories and nutrients to sustain energy for actual survival work, like chopping wood, carrying supplies, and defending your home? But here's what most people completely ignore. Your food and water stockpile will eventually run out. What's your plan when that happens? Have you identified fresh water sources nearby? Do you know how to purify water beyond just boiling it? Can you forage for edible plants, fish, or hunt? If not, your so-called preparation is just delaying disaster. Being truly prepared means having a sustainable system in place. That means rainwater collection, a well, a filtration system, and backup purification methods. It means knowing how to grow food, preserve it, and stretch your supplies when needed. If you've only stockpiled, but haven't built the skills to sustain yourself beyond what's in your pantry, you're not prepared. You're just temporarily comfortable. 2. Ignoring local resources and community support. A lone wolf mentality will get you killed. Survival isn't just about what you have, it's about what's around you. The mistake most people make? Ignoring the resources right in their own backyard. You may have a stockpile, but do you know where the nearest freshwater source is? Can you identify edible plants growing in your area? Have you scouted local fishing spots, hunting grounds, or farms? If your survival plan is limited to what's inside your house, you're thinking too small. And here's another massive blind spot. You're not the only one preparing. Your neighbors have skills, knowledge, and supplies that could mean the difference between life and death. Have you built relationships? In a crisis, people who have strong local networks survive longer. A community that shares skills, trades resources, and protects one another is far stronger than any single person holed up alone. Think about it. Do you know who in your area has medical experience? Who can repair generators? Who has extra fuel? In a long-term disaster, bartering will be essential. But if you've never spoken to your neighbors, good luck convincing them to help you. Here's what you should be doing. Identify key local resources now. Fresh water sources, farms, places with useful supplies. Build a community network. Get to know people who have skills you don't. Create a trade plan. What do you have that others might need? What can you offer in return? If your entire plan is, I'll just survive on my own, you're in for a rude awakening. 3. Failing to plan for long-term survival. Short-term prepping is easy. Stock up on food, buy some gear, and you're good for a few months. But what happens when the crisis drags on? What if supply chains don't recover? What if the government doesn't come to save you? If you're only planning for a temporary inconvenience instead of a total collapse, you're setting yourself up to fail. Ask yourself these critical questions. Can you grow your own food, or are you just stockpiling? Do you know how to fix critical tools if they break? What's your long-term plan for clean water, electricity, and sanitation? A real survival plan isn't just about getting through the first wave of disaster. It's about sustaining yourself when modern conveniences don't return. If you don't have a garden already growing, rainwater collection set up, and alternative energy sources ready, you're living in a fantasy. Seeds don't grow overnight, and learning how to cultivate food takes time. Waiting until your stockpile runs low is a death sentence. Likewise, can you repair broken tools, vehicles, or your home if it's damaged? Do you even have the necessary tools? Being self-sufficient means knowing how to keep your resources working. And let's not forget mental survival. Can you handle months or years without the internet, entertainment, or the comfort of normal life? If you're relying on modern luxuries to stay sane, you're going to crack long before your supplies run out. Real survival means long-term planning. If you haven't thought beyond the first few months, you're already behind. 4. Lack of practical survival skills. Owning survival gear and actually knowing how to use it are two very different things. Most preppers are gear collectors, not survivalists. If your plan is built on the idea that you'll figure it out when the time comes, you won't. Think about it. Can you start a fire in the rain without matches or a lighter? Do you know how to perform first aid on an infected wound? Can you fix a broken vehicle with nothing but basic tools? If your only knowledge comes from watching YouTube videos or reading books, you're not prepared. You're just entertained. Skills must be practiced and often. Here's the reality check. Learn medical skills now. CPR, wound care, setting a broken bone, practice fire starting, shelter building, and cooking from scratch. Get hands-on experience fixing engines, plumbing, and electrical systems. Your stockpile won't save you if you don't know how to physically survive when things go bad. 5. Overlooking security measures. Let's cut to the chase. If you can't protect your supplies, you don't really own them. A locked door and good intentions won't stop desperate people when food runs out. If you think, that won't happen in my area, you're delusional. Security isn't paranoia, it's survival. Your home needs to be defensible. That means reinforced doors and windows, a secure perimeter, fences, alarms, cameras, a solid plan for defending your home if it's targeted. And let's be honest, do you have weapons? If not, what's your plan when someone bigger, stronger, and armed wants what you have? Being prepared isn't just about having food and water. It's about keeping it safe. If you ignore security, you might as well hand your supplies over to the first unprepared person who comes knocking. 6. Lack of financial preparedness. If you think having a debit card and a bank account full of money will keep you safe in a crisis, think again. When disaster strikes, the entire financial system can collapse overnight. ATMs run out of cash, credit card machines stop working, and online banking becomes useless when the power grid fails. What will you do then? If you haven't already prepared, you're in trouble. Cash is king in the early stages of a crisis, but don't rely on it for long. In a full-scale emergency, the value of paper money plummets because stores run out of goods, and no one cares about dollar bills when they need food and water. This is where barter becomes critical. The real currency in a crisis is survival essentials, things people will trade their last possessions for. Do you have enough to trade? If not, you're at a major disadvantage. The best barter items are necessities: food, clean water, medical supplies, hygiene products, and fuel. Tools, lighters, candles, and ammunition also hold significant value. In a prolonged collapse, luxury items like coffee, alcohol, and tobacco become highly desirable trade goods. But remember, bartering is a skill. If you don't know how to negotiate, you'll be taken advantage of quickly. Being financially prepared doesn't mean just stockpiling cash or trade goods. It means being adaptable. Can you generate income if your job disappears? Do you have tangible skills that people will pay or trade for in a post-corruption world? If not, start learning now. The financially unprepared will be the first to struggle when the system fails. 7. No evacuation plan or mobility strategy. So, you've got all your supplies neatly stored in your home and you feel confident you can ride out any disaster. But what if you can't stay? What if a wildfire, flood, riot, or military lockdown forces you to leave immediately? If you don't have an evacuation plan, you're not as prepared as you think. Having a well-thought-out bug-out plan is essential. That means knowing where you'll go, how you'll get there, and what you'll take with you. A bug-out bag isn't just a trendy survival item. It's a lifeline. It should contain food, water, first aid, survival tools, and essential documents. But more importantly, you need to have a solid exit strategy. Do you know multiple evacuation routes? Do you have backup locations in case your primary destination is inaccessible? If the answer is no, you're at risk. Reliable transportation is another factor people ignore. If you think you can just hop in your car and drive away, consider traffic jams, fuel shortages, and roadblocks. Your vehicle should always be well-maintained, fueled, and stocked with emergency supplies. If you rely solely on public transportation, you're in trouble. because buses and trains won't run in a crisis. Quick decision-making is vital. If you wait too long to leave, you might get trapped. Hesitation can be deadly when roads become clogged with panicked evacuees. Always have a plan, practice your route, and be ready to leave at a moment's notice. Those who fail to prepare an evacuation plan often don't survive to regret it. 8. Over-reliance on technology. Technology is great until it fails. The modern world has made people soft and dependent on gadgets for everything. GPS tells you where to go, the internet answers all your questions, and your phone keeps you connected. But what happens when the grid goes down? If you're relying on technology for survival, you're setting yourself up for disaster. Navigation is one of the biggest issues. If your phone dies, can you read a paper map? Can you use a compass? Most people can't, and that's a major problem. Knowing how to navigate without technology is a fundamental survival skill that too many people neglect. Fire starting is another issue. Many people carry lighters and matches but never learn primitive fire-making techniques. What if your lighters run out of fuel or get wet? Can you start a fire with flint and steel? Can you make a bow drill? If not, you're not prepared. Cooking is another weak spot. Microwaves and electric stoves won't work in a prolonged power outage. If you don't know how to cook over an open flame or with simple tools like a rocket stove or solar oven, you'll struggle. Stockpiling food is only half the battle. Being able to prepare it without modern appliances is just as important. The bottom line? Don't rely on technology to save you. Assume that in a real crisis, all modern conveniences will disappear. Learn to survive the way our ancestors did, or you'll be left helpless when the power goes out for good. 9. Lack of basic survival skills. You can have the best survival gear in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, it's worthless. Survival isn't about owning the latest gadgets. It's about having the skills to stay alive without them. Too many people focus on stockpiling but completely ignore the most important aspect of preparedness: knowledge. Do you know how to start a fire without a lighter? Can you build a shelter with materials around you? Do you know how to signal for help if you're stranded? If not, you're dangerously unprepared. Fire making, shelter building, and emergency signaling are 3 of the most critical survival skills, yet most people don't practice them. Watching a YouTube video isn't enough. You need hands-on experience. Go outside and try making a fire with flint and steel. Sleep in a shelter you built yourself. Test your ability to send a distress signal using mirrors, flares, or even ground markers. These aren't just skills for extreme survivalists. They can save your life in everyday situations. Imagine your car breaking down in the wilderness or a house fire forcing you to flee into the cold. If you lack these skills, you'll be at the mercy of the elements. If you truly want to be prepared, start practicing survival skills now. The time to learn isn't when disaster strikes, it's today. 10. Medical unpreparedness. A first aid kit is useless if you don't know how to use it. Too many people buy fancy medical kits and assume they're covered, but when an actual emergency happens, they panic because they never learned how to treat injuries. You need to know more than just putting on a Band-Aid. In a real survival scenario, you might have to treat severe wounds, burns, or infections without access to a doctor. Do you know how to stop heavy bleeding? Can you stitch a wound if necessary? Do you know what to do in case of a severe allergic reaction? CPR is another critical skill. If someone collapses, can you keep them alive until help arrives? Most people can't because they've never been properly trained. Taking a CPR and first aid course should be mandatory for anyone serious about preparedness. Mental health is another overlooked aspect of medical preparedness. In a crisis, people break down. Anxiety, depression, and panic attacks can be just as dangerous as physical injuries. Do you know how to handle high-stress situations and keep yourself mentally strong? If not, start working on mental resilience now. In a true emergency, you may be the only medical help available. Knowing how to handle injuries, illnesses, and mental health crises can mean the difference between life and death. If you're not medically prepared, you're not prepared at all. The harsh truth? Most people think they're prepared, but they're not. Gaps in food, water, skills, security, and long-term planning will turn even the best stockpile into a temporary safety net at best. Survival isn't just about what you have. It's about what you know and how well you can adapt. If any of these points hit home, it's time to reassess your plan, fix the weak spots now while you still can. Because when disaster strikes, the difference between survival and struggle comes down to one thing: real preparation. So, are you actually ready or just comfortable? The choice is yours.